So, I mean, one of the beauty, and we'll discuss this during the presentation, which is probably going to start in about 1 minute for the two of you. One of the benefits, primary benefits, is that it is so broad in terms of that consortium, and most universities that are going to be involved in REDCap are there because of collaboration, because of the benefits that they get from collaborating with so many different universities in so many different countries. All right. So this is a presentation on REDCap, and I'd like to introduce my group. And so I am the Director of Research Technology at St. Louis University, and I'm going to be presenting just kind of the institutional needs and institutional view of what brought us to REDCap in the first place. And then Eric Kaufman, who is our application systems analyst, and the primary technical person who created and set up the system and does most of the support for the system today, will then take off to tell you about some of the technical sides of it. And then Chris McMahon, who's sitting over here, will then take off to talk about the support side of it and the building of REDCap and how it's utilized within the different departments that we're involved with. So, how did we start REDCap? How did it evolve in St. Louis University? Similar to what you talked about, a researcher came to us and said, we'd like this application. Do you support REDCap? Can you give me access to it? And as we talked to that one person, the funny thing happened that over a period of 2 or 3 weeks, I had 3 requests for the same application. And so I started looking at this and looking at the consortium that was out there, and found that there were many researchers at different universities, and they all had a need for an instrument that was exclusively built for researchers. And we had our own survey and data management tool in Qualtrics that was used by the university. So IT said, well, we already got this tool. But the issue was that the researchers that we were dealing with came from different universities, and they had this tool that was specifically designed for the research community. And REDCap provided that. In addition, it had these libraries of collection instruments and forms that other tools just don't have. And they're specifically related to all of their research needs. So they had basically templates that they could use to do their own research. So REDCap Consortium is a consortium of 757 institutional partners, and they're primarily universities in 60 countries. Huge. That's 80,000 projects that are currently being done by those 757 institutions. And that's 104,000 users today. And it's growing phenomenally. If you look there 6 months from now, because the number last year was much smaller. It was, I think, if I remember correctly, it was in the 400s in terms of institutions that were using REDCap, were part of the consortium, just a year ago, and now you're up over 750. So it's a growing consortium of research universities who see the benefit of collaboration and working together. You know, we heard in this speech earlier today about these islands and the importance of building relationships with other institutions. And that's really where REDCap comes from. And Vanderbilt saw that. They initiated REDCap in the first place. They are the major supporter of REDCap today. And yet they have a list of all of their partners that are out there and all of the active projects that they're involved in and the number of users at each one of those institutions. So at SLU, one of the concerns that we had is how do the researchers and how do ITS, what are their considerations? What are the concerns that they had going forward? So the researchers needed a survey and data management tool that was specific to research. They needed it designed for research. It needed to be turnkey and free and easy to use. And so they came to us with that idea, can you provide that environment for us? And from that basis, we went to IT and we said, can we get a server? Can we get a server? Can you set that up? Can we put that environment together? And ITS, our information technology group, was good enough to actually join the consortium so that we as an institution became part of the REDCap consortium. And that required a certain level of support. Said, okay, if you're going to join the consortium and you're going to install REDCap, you have to agree to provide the level of support to build the server, to have the software available on that server, and to be part of the network. So the level of support that the researchers were looking at was broad-based. They wanted the ability to have other universities. A lot of them came from those universities, right? And they were familiar with REDCap. So training from that perspective had already been in place for them. And they wanted to be able to move as quickly as possible. As I said before, they needed to be multidisciplinary. So there's a broad base of research tools and collection devices that were out there, and it needed to be secure. So web-based application, and they needed to be a secure application. And other ITS considerations, it needed to be secure and compliant. We needed it to be very low cost. We have limited resources in ITS, and in fact, in our little group, there's only like 5 of us in the group, and we have very few resources to be able to devote to this. The environment, the REDCap environment, has been relatively low in terms of the support effort. At this point, and I'll let Eric talk to that as he comes up here, but I think it's relatively easy to set up. We didn't have to do a lot of training, and that was one of the requirements in ITS's perspective, because we just didn't have the resources to provide that training. And fortunately, the consortium has a number of tools that are out there to train people. It has videos and different training materials that are out there, and Chris will talk to that a little bit. And then it needed to have a commitment. If we were going to do this for SLU, we needed that commitment of shared resources between research and IT, because between any one of us didn't have the resources to do it. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Eric and let him talk about what it takes to set it up and support it, and what the capabilities are of the product itself.
Hi, I'm just going to go through the setup and some technical aspects of the application quickly. Basically, it's just a PHP and MySQL based open source application, so it's pretty easy to set up. You have a web server. You can either set it up on a Linux server, and you can also set it up within Windows. Currently, we're running on Linux. There's also some third-party plugins that need to be installed. The beauty of that is kind of there's a when you install it, there's a PHP script that you can access by a page that tells you what you need to install. Then you can keep going back and checking to make sure you have everything installed until you have the installation right. Basically, there are two different types of the application. There's a standard release and long-term support version. The standard release is basically it's the latest and greatest. It's released normally once a month. It's not a beta. It's considered a full portion release. It's also the most common install. We've actually gone for the long-term support install because eventually we're looking to put it into a compliance environment. So basically, so this is the version we're using, which is the long-term support. This is basically supported for 6 months after the release date. It's considered the more stable version of the application. And this is the current version we use. What good is an application though if you can't actually use it for anything? So it's easy to set up. Basically, you can build online databases quickly and securely. You can go from like a concept to a production often in a day or less. You have ad hoc reporting. I think a major use of this tool is you can get data out of it in major formats. It supports SAS, R, SPSS, and Excel. And finally, the authentication is kind of flexible. You can either do it via table-based, which means that it basically just authenticates against a MySQL table on your server, or you can also do LDAP. And REDCap has its own development API. This can be used to make REDCap interact with other sites, widgets, etc.
Quick question about the environment that it lives under. We have a combination of both Linux and Windows systems.
Yeah.
Do you know if it supports any other database systems other than MySQL? Will it run under MS&SQL, or is it purely MySQL?
To my knowledge, it's purely SQL. You might be able to get it to function with other applications, but
I believe you can. I've read about our school that have decided to back into it.
Okay, just curious.
Microsoft SQL.
When you already have the infrastructure in place, so when we can land it on an existing server.
when you do a setup, it actually has a MySQL. It actually has a dump that you need to import of like a configuration dump. So I imagine you could put it into another database.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll hand it over to Chris.
Thanks, Aaron. My name is Christine McMahon, and I work in research technology. And I float between a number of projects, mainly within regulatory compliance. And I've been given the task to support the customer side of REDCap. So that allows me kind of a unique perspective in that I can listen closely to what's happening with our researchers, our principal investigators. I can look at how it fits into our compliance demands and needs for our compliance. And I can also help folks understand what it is they need to do to get out and running pretty quickly. So one of the things that we have is just a pretty lightweight crew, so we had to get up to speed pretty quickly. I was given the REDCap assignment just a few weeks ago, and we already have a number of departments using it. The interesting thing about the departments that are using it, it started on our North Campus in psychology, but we have a big demand in nursing and also in the medical side. And the interesting thing about the medical side is it's set up to support investigator initiatives. And at the university, if I'm a doc and have a great idea, I might have to spend $5,000 or $10,000 of my own money to go out and collect enough data to be able to present something to a sponsor. So what happens here is you can do this pretty much for free. It has the ability to have multiple arms, so I can have an arm of the study that would be a placebo and maybe an investigated a new device or drug. And then I can also do studies over a long period of time. So they have longitudinal studies, so I can follow people for a month, 6 months, a year, 3 years, which we found that difficult to do in other survey programs. So we have a very diverse group of users. So we've got the med school at one end of our campus. We straddle Highway 4064. And the other end we have mostly arts and science and the humanities. So biology is on one end, med school on the other. We have an engineering school. And so in order to get this up and running, we've gone through and selected people who are pretty flexible, that can tolerate a little failure, they can tolerate a little stumbling. And so they're the first groups coming into this to help us get this off the ground. And we also work with a number of graduate students who were very quickly up to speed. One of our professors calls them shovel ready, so that helps. And then what we want to do is be able to develop a cadre of people that know this program and are willing to sit through user group meetings and chat with other people about what they've done. So we're rolling it out very slowly since we're such a small group. We're looking at, right now, since I'm working with all the regulatory folks, the human subject people are very interested in, once we approve a paper survey that goes out, we have a pretty good control over, what that paper survey looked like when it left. With this, they'll be able to actually go in and look at that and make sure it meets the standards. And they have to enter their IRB information. So it's not like you can set up shop and have a renegade collection started without the IRB's having some notice. Anyway, in the past, we had the idea that researchers would build these databases, and they might have a graduate student for a year or two, and they would just be going gangbusters. And then pretty soon the graduate student would move on. The major professor would be left stranded on this data island. What seemed like a good idea at first suddenly became very toxic. So the past practices involved a lot of starting up, getting the data that they wanted, realizing that the data they had collected could be enhanced and used over, but then they didn't have the experience or the know-how or the staff to be able to do that. So they were very, very limited. So we had lots of fits and starts. And so what we want to do is mentor ways in which REDCap and the data collection tools, they're very uniquely put together in that they allow the researcher with very little database knowledge, which can be a dangerous thing, but it does give them somewhat of support in a training wheel kind of way, that as they're entering data, if they enter things that might look like a social security number, it'll grab that and say, does this need to be de-identified as you export? So there's a lot of little things that it will stop researchers from exporting information that shouldn't go out. So we have to be fast and flexible and to be able to support production surveys almost immediately as school began. So the nice thing about this is it's web-based. So I go to the web, I create a survey or a database, I can immediately publish it. It can be available in a matter of 30 minutes. We've had one group that published a survey in less than 30 minutes. It doesn't require any unique programming experience, so it has little widgets that walk you through the whole collection and building. And so your expertise is focused on your subject and not becoming a programmer. You can have access, granted, to only people in your particular department, your division, across campus, or across the nation. So it's up to you and how much you want to share that. It allows people to slide from their digital collection into paper, to print that out to show people, to have for their human subjects protection. It has very simple exports. It goes right out to R, our SPSS or SAS. So their data is stat tool ready, which really helps as far as being able to make a good analysis quickly. As I said, the good data management guide keeps people from building collections that they can't get information out of. We also are building in best practices and putting together groups of people who understand that as well. So But the researcher is the burden. So it's web accessible. They don't have to worry about hiring 15 students to stand out and hand out paper. They have a lot of collaboration across Wisconsin, across different projects. There's a large library at Vanderbilt. NIH paid for all this. Vandy developed it, but NIH paid for it. So it's growing all the time. We don't have to worry about backups. Eric takes care of that. Thank you. So anyway, we're looking at also sorting out best practices. You know, you can do your dishes and give your baby a bath at the same time. Sounds like a good idea, but it may not turn out well for either side. So we're trying to help people think about that as they set up these particular projects. And again, it's listening, learning, and leading. And that's what we try to do from the very beginning of this project. Are there any questions? I see there's a crowd forming outside. All right, thank you.